All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are all set for the live broadcast stream of today's Louis committee meeting, 6 p.m. on HPA-TV, Comcast, and Frontier Government channels 96 and 6032. It would also be streamed via hpa-tv.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, and HPA-TV's Roku TV, Apple TV, and Amazon TV apps. It would also be rebroadcast and made available on HPA-TV YouTube channel. So thank you everyone for attending. I've just announced the people as I see them. So first, we have Lydia Colon, who works in City Council in my office. We have Councilman Amilcar Hernandez, who is a voting member. We have Pam Ratty, who is in the HR department, assistant director, I believe, Pam. And then we have the director, Marlene Fleeting of HR. We have attorney Daniel Combs from the Corp Counsel office. We have attorney Lombardi, also from the Corporation Counsel office. And I think, is there one other person, Lydia? Who am I missing? No other people missing. Okay, great.
That's just HPA-TV.
Oh, HPA-TV. All right, fantastic. So with that being said, today we're introducing, here, let me just read it. So it is Mayor Bronin with the accompanying ordinance amending the Civil Services Ordinance. And here to speak on it is, I believe, Pam Ratty and Director Fleeting, or Assistant Director Ratty and Director Fleeting. So the floor is yours.
So good evening, everyone. I am Marlene Fleeting, Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations. So before we talk about the ordinance, I just wanted to just briefly say that Pam is our Assistant Director. She's over Civil Service, so she'll be speaking more so to the ordinance. I think Pam wants to just figure out if you guys want us to just go line by line, or if you have specific questions, or how would you like us to go forward with it?
I think one of the things that has worked in the past, instead of going over the entire ordinance, is a pretty lengthy document. More so talk about, what was done in the past and what are the changes and why the changes are good changes.
Okay, sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So like Marlene said, I'll just go ahead and go over the significant recommendations that we have by section. So in accordance with the resolution from City Council, our team took some time to look into our processes, and we solicited some feedback from the appointing authorities in the city, and really tried to develop some recommendations that we think is going to streamline the process and make it more efficient for everybody as a whole. So the first section that we're going to start off with is section 2-378, paragraph B.2. And basically this section is for the certification of eligible. So currently the way that it works is when we receive applications and the HR department determines them qualified, they are placed on an eligible list after they're scored and put into separate bands. So based on those bands is how the department will see the list. So if a band has 6 names in it, the department will see those first 6 names. So one of the recommendations we're making is to change the rule of the list, which is something we do for the entry-level police officer recruitments right now. And what it will do is it will send every qualified candidate to the department to review. So they will get the full list instead of just 1 band or 2 bands of the list. So they'll be able to see all candidates that HR has qualified for that recruitment at once. This is time saving for the department because at this point, like I said, they're getting small bands at a time, which could sometimes, if it's a larger recruitment of 15 to 20 candidates, it might take a couple weeks before they actually get the final list of names, the final band of names. So it can take a little longer for them to see everybody, and this way they'll get everybody at once. And with that change, they would also get all Hartford residents and veterans through that process. Right now, Hartford residents and veterans get preference points that add to that score. And while it might make their score go up, it doesn't necessarily change the band that they're in. So for example, if we have an admin assistant recruitment, which is typically one of our larger ones, and there's 20 people on the list and a Hartford resident scores 16. They might not ever even make it to the department for an interview. With rule of the list, we will annotate who is a Hartford resident, has supplied the documents that we need for that, as well as who has a veteran's preference. And they'll go straight to the department, and the department will be able to see them, guaranteed to see them, whereas right now they may not. So that's the most significant part in the certification of eligibles. The next change in that is the interview requirements. So right now, if we send a cert list of 6 names to a department, the department is required to interview all 6 of those names if those candidates reach out. Sometimes, as I'm sure we all know, people don't respond to interview requests or don't show up for the interview request, but they're required to at least try to hear from all 6 of them. And so with this rule of the list, that could really be lengthy if they have a list of 20 people to try to wait and hear from all 20 people. So with moving to the rule of the list, we're recommending that we move to the interview process where they would interview 2 more than the number of vacancies. And all Hartford residents and all veterans. So like I said, we would annotate on those certification lists if they have proved their Hartford residency and if they have proved their veteran status. And so those individuals will be guaranteed an interview with the department. And that way, again, we're trying to give more preference to Hartford residents. And in that change is right now with the Hartford residents and their points, they, like I said, don't always get seen, and this time they definitely would. So everybody will be seen, and the department will be able to, choose a Hartford resident or a veteran if they so choose. The next section is section 2-377, which is the eligible list. So currently, as I said in the first bullet, and some of these bleed into each other a little bit because the language kind of repeats in the sections. Right now we are scoring and breaking the candidates into bands, but with that rule of the list, it's not necessary anymore. So we would eliminate the scores in the ranks. So when we send a certification list up of all the candidates, they will go up basically all at the same level. They'll all be equal standing on the eligible list, and somebody won't be ranked number 1 or number 20. They'll all be equal, and the department can look at their applications from there. So that would require them to just to put them in an order. We would just do it alphabetically. The second change is the duration of the open competitive list, which is in that section as well. Currently, our open competitive lists are good for 1 year. So they expire 1 year after the date of the date that they're created, except for police officer and firefighter. We were looking to recommend from 1 year to 6 months. And so with that, what we're trying to get out of that is, with the list being good for 1 year, if a department has multiple vacancies for, let's again say admin assistant, they would see a repeat name and be required to interview them right now with the way that our process is, even though they may have already spoken to them and maybe determined that they weren't the best suit within their department. So if we lower the, expiration date to 6 months from the creation of the list, then the department will have less repeat candidates that they have already interviewed and deemed not the best fit for their particular department. But we do have option and language in the code that will still allow the Director of Human Resources to extend the duration of an open competitive list up to 3 years. And so we do use that pretty often for the entry-level firefighter exams. It's a large recruitment and a lot of exams, and they can't hold as many classes as quickly. So we do tend to extend that one. So that change would be for open competitive list, except for police officer and firefighter, and moving that from 1 year to 6 months. Again, to just keep the process moving, allow us to post quicker, because we're not going back to these old lists that could have been from 9 months ago that a department has already seen.
Right. And it'll also stop the department head from saying, hey, why you guys keep giving me this list? I've already seen these people. Why do you keep giving me the same list of people? Give me someone else. So that'll help as well. And I know Pam has given a lot of information thus far. So if you have any questions along the way, you can just, let us know.
No, we normally do the questions at the end, so
Okay.
we'll make notes of the questions,
Okay.
and then we'll refer back.
Okay.
Okay, so the next section is section 2-373, which is our method of rating. And again, that ties into the rule of the list recommendation change as well. So this would basically let us, right now in the current process, if there's testing, so for example, entry-level police officer, they have to pass each component of that exam to move on to the next one. So for example, they have to participate in our physical ability test and pass that in order to then move on to the written exam and then into the oral exam. And with that, the written exam and the oral exams, they require scoring from our testing company and as well as HPD representatives. And so those could take 3 to 4 weeks sometimes before we're able to actually participate in the next part of the exam. So our hope with this recommendation is that while they will all need to still pass each part of the exam, so they would still need to pass the physical, pass the written, pass the oral, we would be able to move them through the process without quite knowing that they passed the written exam. So they can, the physical we get results for immediately. That one's pretty simple. But then the written, right now, we would give them a written exam, wait 3 to 4 weeks to receive results, and then do an oral. With this, we're hoping to match some of what the other PDs in the area are doing, where they're kind of doing recruiting weekends or recruiting in, a day or two, just so that we're having less time that candidates have to take time off of work and attend testing and things like that. So that is the main change in the method of rating. So those are the overview of the changes that we're making. Really the most significant being that rule of the list, the Hartford residency preference and veteran preference, and the interview process, which with that rule of the list really gives the department heads the discretion to review the qualified candidates that HR has sent them and, spend their time interviewing who they think, would be the best fit after they review those applications as well. So we're hoping that, eliminates time for them interviewing and waiting for people who might not show up or who they might not think is the absolute best fit for the position.
Great job. So, Councilman Hernandez, do you have any questions? The floor is yours.
Yes, sir. So at first sight, it does make sense. All these changes. It does provide the flexibility. It does provide the opportunity for department heads who are the quote unquote experts in the field to have a broader list of candidates to choose based on their needs. And I am one to think that not necessarily the one that ranks the highest on paper is always the best candidate, because you have to also take into account cultural, you have to take into account other pieces that maybe the score doesn't necessarily accurately capture. So I get that. I also agree with the getting rid of the bands again, because it opens up the floor for more opportunities and for department heads to see that. So all the changes, even with the exams, not having to wait 3-4 weeks for the police exam, let's just get it all through, and then once we get the scores, we'll know if they have to repeat any portion of the exam, or if but at least they got all the other pieces already in place. So I get all that. So here's my question. My question is, with these changes, I can see, and correct me if I'm wrong, I can see how now department heads will bear now a little bit of more responsibility. They have to have more resources in place, and I mean resources, not necessarily personnel, but also maybe personnel, but also time in going through a broader list of applicants, in also going through the process of internally ranking them, right? Because they're going to eventually do their own internal ranking and see, okay, who are the candidates that could go to the next step, or whatever the case may be. Has there been any pushback that of any particular department on how this is going to affect them negatively in the sense of the resources that they may have to now put in place for this?
So we did speak to some departments, and we did try to think of those situations when it would be more timely for the departments. And we do address that in some of it. For example, our Maintainer 1 recruitment, which is a really great recruitment that we do for Public Works, where it's geared for only for Hartford residents and requires minimal experience. It's a great way to get residents into the city and through the Maintainer series, but it is Hartford residency required, right? So when we end up with 55 people on a list and they're all Hartford residents, and our interview language technically says that you have to interview all Hartford residents, that could be quite the undertaking, 50 interviews, which is actually currently what they have to do now as well. So we did put some language in that interview process, in that language. Let's see if I can point it specifically out. That will say, yes. So in that section, we do say that all the change ensures that veterans are, I'm going to find it. It is in here, but basically it's when all Hartford residency is required, like it is for the entry-level firefighter and for this Maintainer 1 position, for the recreation assistants, for those positions that would be very time consuming, they would get the 2 more than the number of vacancies rule as well, even though they are all Hartford residents. So they'll receive a list of, again, with maintainers, 55 maintainers on it who are all Hartford residents, and they can again review those applications and interview 3 if they have 1 vacancy. So I think it will actually cut down on a lot of time for them, especially the waiting period. We're trying to get people in the door pretty quickly, and right now with them having to wait for candidates to reach out to them to say they want to interview, we're giving them 5 business days for candidates to reach out, since they do have to interview everybody on that list. And with this, the candidates aren't going to be directed to reach out to the department. They'll be directed that they were certified to the department, and they may or may not hear from the department. And so the department can take the time to pick their 3 candidates that they want to interview, or more if they have more than 1 vacancy. And then they can schedule those 3 pretty immediately if they're able to get a hold of them.
I'm sorry, when you say that they may or may not hear from the department, can you explain that to me? So if I apply and I do get the notice that says that I'm certified and I'm moving to that next step of that I may or may not be notified. If I am one of those that would not be going through the interview process, am I not notified at least that I am not going through the interview process, and do I get, or am I just stay, or do I just stay in limbo, like not knowing whether? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So you might not get as much of a notice as quickly, but the way that we would move forward is similarly to what we do when the interview processes are over now, is once the department makes a candidate selection and the candidate actually accepts the offer, because we do get some declines and they can then move on to a different selection. But once we have an accepted offer and somebody who starts, makes it through the background and pre-employment physical, we do send now, and we will continue to send letters. They're called no offer letters, and it just lets the candidates know that the department had selected someone who they felt was a better fit, reminds them that they are going to remain on the eligible list for, right now it says up to 1 year, but pending these recommended changes could say 6 months, and that they will be notified if any other vacancies open up within the city and they're certified again. So we do follow up with what their next steps could be.
What's usually the average time between the day that candidates are chosen to go through the interview until you get to that point where an offer of employment has been offered, and then a decision is made to send this notification that you are no longer going to be, considered for this position? What's the average time?
It does vary pretty significantly depending on departments. Some departments do move through interviews pretty quickly, but I would say on average, it's about 3 to 4 weeks, because we do really try to wait until the candidate, even after they have accepted the offer, comes and makes it here for their first day, because a lot of things can change in just a few weeks. Sometimes they go to give their 2 weeks notice and they're current employer may come back with a different offer. So we don't want to send out a no offer letter that tells you, oh, you haven't been selected for this current position, and then a week later say, oh, actually that fell through, so we are going to pick you. We're trying to eliminate some of that confusion. So we do try to wait until the candidate who was selected started. So that can be about 3, 4, 5 weeks if the department takes a little longer.
I'm not going to argue that it's a. I mean, I wish it was a little quicker, right? But because I've been on that end, at some point in my life, where you are in that on that limbo, kind of waiting to see, and it creates anxiety. It creates doubts, and as a candidate, I'm even afraid to apply in other places because the job that I really want is the one with the city of Hartford, right? So I don't want to apply another place and they get chosen and then have to turn them down after because the city of Hartford called me, right? The same thing happened when you apply for the state. They take 6 months, before you even hear from them, right? And it creates anxiety. We all been in those situations where, right? So I'm not gonna argue, 3, 4 weeks, and I understand that the rationale behind it, but I wanted to kind of understand and kind of bring it to the surface that and the more we can minimize that, I think the better it is because the more efficient we are, towards our the candidates that apply, because then the next time, if they have to wait too long, the next time they are not going to feel really like, I don't want to apply anymore. Because these people, they keep me in limbo for months, like what I'm saying? So it's just that kind of mentality. So,
and also, I'm sorry, Councilman, just to, to your point, we also make ourselves available for any questions at any time. We pride ourselves in communicating with candidates, external or internal, so and applicants. So we really pride ourselves in that. So if anyone were to call, we would be able to give them as much information as possible as well during that time, because we do recognize that that waiting period can be pretty, frustrating.
Yep. Ultimately, my only concern will be the resources for the department heads. I would like to see how that's going to play out, right? I'm not sure that we could make a projection of how that's going to play out. I guess depending on how many candidates and the different positions, I can see how it could vary.
Right. Well, I can tell you. I'm sorry, I can tell you several department heads that I've spoken to are excited, when I say, hey, you can possibly get, all of your candidates. And they're like, really? That's great. That'll be great because we'll get to see everybody, instead of waiting for, us to get 5 and then 5 and then 5 or whatever, So the majority of people, they're excited
now
about.
Let's make sure that they have the resources and and to make this a very efficient process, right? It makes sense. But let's do it right? So let's hope that they do. And if they for some reason are not as efficient, how can the HR department support that process? Even though it's a process that you kind of hand over to them, is there any way that HR can support that process if for some reason there is one particular position that has a lot of candidates and they need more support?
Yes, we definitely, we've offered before in some of the departments, again, that maintainer 1 recruitment gets pretty large, and we have offered to, be a part of their interview committee if they do need some extra hands on deck to participate. And then we also try to give them some advice on, maybe starting with a first round interview via phone or Zoom, because those can move a little bit quicker than the in-person ones can. And then, follow up with a second interview, maybe in person, after they've gone through those initial interviews. So we definitely will try to be a resource to the departments. And to your point with the communication, one of our internal factors that if these recommendations move forward that we have on our plate is we have a lot of repeat candidates, right? We have a lot of people who apply to positions, for many years throughout in the city. And so we are going to draft new language in our letters that is very bold and bright to let them know that there has been a change in our process, because these people who have applied multiple times are expecting, that email that says to reach out to director whomever to schedule an interview. And so we don't want to make the process more confusing, especially for those repeat ones, because we appreciate those repeat candidates. So we do have on our list, if the recommendations are approved to move forward, ways to communicate and change those notices that go out now so that it's very clear that there's been a change of our process. And that way it's not as confusing for those repeat candidates, or even if they interviewed or applied 2 years ago, they might remember the process. So we want to make sure that that is something important and specific that goes out, that they understand that there's been a change and what that change is.
And my last question, so I could then, because I've talked a lot more than I thought I was going to, but one thing led to the other. There is no, this process does not interfere in any way with any labor agreements with any of our unions. That has been sorted out already?
Right. This is all for open and competitive and like entry-level police officer and firefighter recruitments. This does not apply to any promotional exams. The promotional exams will continue the way that they are.
Okay. All right. That concludes my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
So just these are more two maybe statements and / guidelines. So I think the first thing for me, has there been any consideration or thought in regards to the amount of outreach? Yes, they're going to get all the candidate lists, but the amount of outreach that's given. So for example, I call this person 1 time and I call this other person 5 times. Are we tracking the amount of outreach efforts that are made towards each candidate? Are we text messaging? Are we emailing? What is, how are we tracking all of the efforts that we're making to the candidates?
We do ask department heads to track it. It's going to be something that we're going to have to work with the department heads and give them some guidance and put some trust in our departments to know that they're, going to make every effort possible. Because right now, like I said, the candidates receive an email and it's their job to reach out to the departments. And this will change it to the departments reaching out to the candidates. So I'm confident that the department heads will really do everything in their power to get a hold of the candidates, especially because they're going to be able to make that choice and have that discretion on who they want to talk to. So they're going to really want to talk to that candidate. And I'm pretty confident that they will go ahead and do that. Our cert lists are not changing so much in their format, and those formats do have like a comment section. And so they definitely, normally right now, they would just write selected or not selected, or if they withdrew from a recruitment, the candidate. But, they can definitely use that to track, if they've sent an email or they've made a phone call or something along those lines. But I have a lot of confidence that the department heads, since it's going to be somebody that they're selecting to spend their time with, that they will make every effort to reach out.
No, that makes sense, because I think every department head wants and staff. So the second thing is in regards to guideline and Hartford residency. Can the person they apply, they have to be a Hartford resident, can they move out the next day, or is there any penalty for that?
So they have to prove their Hartford residency at the time of application. So if they have the proof at the time of application, we will move forward with annotating them as a Hartford resident. And, if they take a union position, we no longer can require that residency. But if they're unclassified, then, we would continue to address the residency. But it's the time of application.
What I will say is if there's any incentives and guidelines or the opportunities, for example, there's the mayor just announced, home residency or home ownership. I think upon that is letting folks know we also want you to continue to live in Hartford. And these are some of the opportunities, right? The low-hanging fruit that can be provided for you, the list of options if you stayed in Hartford that you would be eligible for, I think would be very enticing to folks to get them to stay. We want folks that not only are from the community, but want to stay and rooted in the community. So just an example, or maybe a listing of a 1-pager with all the bullet points as to the benefits that they would be eligible for to if they choose to stay in Hartford. All right. So with that being said, the chair will entertain a motion.
Second.
All right. So the motion has been made and properly second. Any discussion? Seeing that
Councilman
yes.
LeBron, are you moving to pass the item with a recommendation? I didn't hear what the motion was.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you, Corp Counsel. Great flag. So Amilcar, you would have to make the motion. The chair entertain a motion, either favorable or not favorable.
I make a motion to pass this to the council with a favorable opinion.
Recommendation. All right. So I second. So the motion has been made with a favorable recommendation and properly seconded. Any communication or any thoughts, questions, comments? Seeing none, the chair will take a vote. Everyone say aye in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record reflect both Councilman Hernandez and I voted favorably for this ordinance to be sent back to council with a favorable recommendation. All right. The council, Attorney Lombardi, how we do? Good. Okay. I saw some consternation in your face. I was hoping we did okay.
That's just my face, Councilman LeBron. It always looks like that.
I'm not comment on that. But with that being said, and no other items on the agenda, everyone have a wonderful evening. Peace and love.
You do the same. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.